Trucker Dump for June 30th, 2013, episode 95. 4 reasons that trucker might be tailgating you.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com. Resources to help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
G'day folks, Todd McCann here with a slightly hoarse voice. Not sure if you can tell, but I can sure feel it. I was fine yesterday while I was belting out tunes from the 80s country station on Pandora, but once I switched over to classic rock and started wailing with the rawness of Creedence, the vocal stretch that is Journey, and the Someone Hit Me in the Junk with a Wrecking Ball vocals of Boston, things went south quick. Even switching to soft rock didn't help much since I got bombarded by Chicago songs. What's that you say? I could have quit singing. No, I'm sorry. That's just not possible. If Peter Cetera is singing, so am I. So anyway, enough about the butchery of perfectly good songs. On with today's topic. First, I hope it's quiet enough for you. The best I could do today was a spot beside a truck with an APU that comes on periodically. Hopefully it won't be too distracting. And of course, I can't stop the flow of trucks through a truck stop, so there's that too. So onward. What we have in store today is something I've been thinking about a lot as I watch the traffic of America. Of course, I think I'm right, but I have a feeling there'll be some opposing views on this one. So be sure to stay tuned until the end to find out how to leave your comments telling me how wrong, or most likely how right, I am. So what is it that I'm right about? Well, I say that there's 4 reasons that trucker might be tailgating you. We've all seen it. A car in the fast lane with a semi-truck so close to its rear bumper that it looks like a St. Bernard is getting ready to get jiggy with a Chihuahua. Or a car creeping along in the slow lane with a rear view mirror full of truck grill. What possesses a trucker to tailgate a car like that? Well, let's step back a second and look at that. But first, let's examine what tailgating actually is. Not just trucker tailgating, anybody tailgating. For those of you in third world countries who have yet to discover the wheel, let me explain this concept. Tailgating is when one vehicle is close to another vehicle's rear bumper. But the question becomes, how close is too close? I think that really depends on the individual. Some drivers might not mind a truck following them at one truck length, while another thinks they can detect diesel fumes breathing down their neck at that distance. Someone else thinks that a 2 or 3 second following distance is okay. Maybe it depends on the type of vehicle you're driving too. I know I'd probably be more nervous being tailgated by a trucker if I were crammed into a new Fiat than if I was manhandling the road in a 1-ton F-350 pickup. And then there are the folks who think that all trucks should have a 6 to 7 second following distance. For the record, this is what most trucking companies and safety organizations recommend. Now, I'm not trying to say that a 3 to 4 second following distance is safer than a 6 to 7 second distance. But have you ever actually tried to follow someone at 6 to 7 seconds? It's a long stinking distance. If you want to get an idea of your following distance, here's how to do it. 1. Pick out a vehicle that's ahead of you in traffic. 2. When they pass a landmark, for example an underpass, a billboard, or railroad tracks, start counting off the seconds. 3. Stop counting when you reach that landmark. 4. Look at your raised fingers and count them. Oh, come on, you know you were doing it. That's how many seconds following distance you have. Now, I'd be willing to bet that the number you come up with will be far less than you think it'll be. If so, then the next time, pick a vehicle even further ahead and try it again. For a real challenge, try not to use your fingers when counting this time. Yes, it's possible. And hey, did you know you can read silently without moving your lips? It's true. Okay. Now, did you find that car that was 6 to 7 seconds ahead of you? I told you. That's a long freaking way from that other car's rear bumper, isn't it? I've been arguing since way back in driving school that a 6 to 7 second distance isn't even possible at times. Seriously, I got into a discussion with the lady that taught defensive driving at my truck driving school. We had just moved back from Dallas, and I remember the evil overlord and I laughing when the teacher said we should leave a 6 to 7 second following distance. I asked her if she'd ever driven in Dallas. I said, As soon as you open up a spot between you and the car in front of you, someone jumps into it and you're back where you started. She responded by saying that a trucker should go 5 mph slower when in traffic. That way, as soon as a passing car gets in front of you, they'll open up a 6 to 7 second following distance faster. What she neglected to take into account is the fact that the passing car isn't the only car on the road, so the gap behind them fills up too. And perhaps even more importantly, since when has going slower than the flow of traffic ever been a safe practice? So what to do? Well, as every trucker has learned, driving school is one thing. Real life is something altogether different. The fact is that there are times when a trucker needs to tailgate. Let's take a look at that. So in no particular order, I present to you the 4 reasons that a trucker might be tailgating you. Trucker tailgating reason number 1, drivers going under the speed limit. I know this might be a shock to some of you four-wheeler drivers, but even the truckers who love their jobs don't do it for giggles. They do it to get paid. And the vast majority of us over-the-roaders don't even get paid unless we're moving down the road. So when some safety-conscious do-gooder decides to go under the speed limit, well, you're affecting our paychecks. Listen, I understand that you fantasize about dropping your boss into a pit full of pissed-off scorpions, and therefore you're not in any rush to get to work. I can also understand that you miss taking advantage of the Cash for Clunkers program by one stinking day, and your car may have trouble reaching the speed limit. If that's the case, that piece of crap shouldn't even be on the road. In either case, you're holding up progress. My feeling on this is that if you're going slower than the speed limit, and you don't have a dang good excuse for it, you deserve to be tailgated. I've got crap to do, appointments to be made, and an evil overlord to appease come payday. So when I get closer to your bumper than you're comfortable with, you can fix that by getting the heck out of my way. Understood, Gordon Lightfoot? Trucker tailgating reason number 2, wishy-washy drivers. For us truckers, the only thing more frustrating than a slow driver is a driver who can't make up their dad-blame mind. And as any trucker can attest to, this goes for truckers as well as four-wheelers. Listen, we drive these heavy suckers for a living, so we understand that a truck can't always maintain a steady speed. But in my ever so humble, but totally awesome opinion, this should only be happening in hilly terrain. A fully loaded big rig can weigh up to 80,000 pounds, even more with the right permits. Therefore, even the slightest change in the slope of the road can cause massive fluctuations in speed. But what's your excuse when you're on flat ground? I can tell you that about 90% of the time when I see a car or a truck varying their speed, it's because they're on the cell phone. Well, I guess I should say that 90% of the vehicles I actually manage to get around. I honestly don't get to see the culprit for the vast majority of fickle-footed drivers. That's because they eventually notice me riding their bumper, and they wake up long enough to pull their head out of their Assassin's Creed cap and hit the gas pedal. While that is frustrating, at least they're out of my way. And you know how much I like for people to be out of my way. As you can see, the first 2 reasons truckers tailgate are simply to bring the driver back to reality so they can hopefully start paying attention to their driving. The 3rd reason, however, is a direct result of the first 2. Trucker tailgating reason number 3, preparing to pass. If it weren't for you folks out there with gas pedal phobia, there'd be no need for number 3 on this list. But since you do exist, much to the chagrin of all society, including your mom, this gives us truckers another reason to tailgate. For you brainiacs out there who haven't thought of this, a truck takes a lot longer to get up to speed than a car does. When a car wants to pass another vehicle, they just mash the gas pedal to the floor, and they're around a 70-foot truck in less time than it takes Sheldon to knock 30,000 times on Penny's door while wearing his Flash Gordon costume. There's a clip to that video if you've never seen Big Bang Theory. Funny show. But when the roles are reversed, it's a major ordeal for the trucker. I remember way back in the summer of '84 when my high school driver education instructor, appropriately named Mr. Lane, taught me how to pass. Even in a car, he told me to get right up behind the slower driver, or in other terms, tailgate him. When the coast was clear, he said, "Step on it." Well, I put my foot down, but I wasn't aware that passing gear mode passed what I thought was all the way to the floor. Thankfully, there was just enough time for me to figure it out while he yelled at me. Now let's look at doing this in a truck. We use reason number 3 and we tailgate the speed-challenged car. Sorry, but if that didn't happen, we'd never get around anyone. Next, we wait for an open spot big enough that even Superman couldn't see an oncoming vehicle, and then we mash on it. And we pretty much get nothing. It takes a long time to get these heavy suckers up to speed. Downshifting helps, but it isn't always effective when you're going 60 miles an hour. At least it isn't in my run-of-the-mill 10-speed company truck. The best case scenario is that the slower driver doesn't feel like dying, so they back out of it and lessen the time we're required to be out in the other lane. Thankfully, this usually happens, but I'll bet I'm not the only trucker who's had to back out of it and duck back behind to escape a game of chicken just because of some stubborn trucker-hating jerk. And of course, remember that it isn't always a 15-foot-long car we're passing. Other times it's another 70-foot-long truck. There are certain carriers out there that you can see from a distance and you know you're going to have to pass them eventually. Once again, we have to get right up on their bumper to set up the pass. I like to use their shiny trailer doors to check my teeth for spinach chunks while I'm waiting for an opening to pass. Once clear, you launch your attack and pray for a cooperative trucker. For more on the challenges of speed-challenged trucks trying to pass each other, check out one of my favorite blog posts I've written called TD095, Truckers Go Turtle Racing. There's a link to that in the show notes and on the blog site. I should also point out that tailgating to set up a pass is necessary whether you're on a 4-lane freeway or a 2-lane country road. On the 2-lane, you need to close the gap for time's sake. On the 4-lane, you want to avoid jumping out and slowing down traffic while you're still 3 truck lengths back. Because if you do that, you can almost guarantee some fast and furious wannabe will come screaming around you on the right and attempt to squeeze back in front of you. And by the way, if you've ever done this, please reach into your silverware drawer, grab a fork, and jab it in your forehead. Thanks. Trucker tailgating reason number 4? The trucker is a jerk. There's no getting around this. Just like the few truckers who refuse to shower give us all a bad rap, there are also a few chronic tailgaters. These are the drivers who are tailgating a car despite the fact that the car is going 75 miles an hour in the fast lane. Yes, Mr. Stud Muffin Trucker, it's nice that you can bury your speedometer needle past your 100 mile an hour gauge. Yes, we can see how fearless and skillful you are because you can ride 5 feet off some unfortunate dude's bumper. I'm so impressed. So what I want to know is why these truckers do this. You see, when I use the word tailgating, I'm talking about following at 2 or 3 car lengths for a brief period of time. The way I see it is no trucker has any reason to be close enough to a car that you can't see the entire vehicle above your hood. Even that's too close at highway speeds. And I've seen some of these miscreants stay that close until they're out of my vision. Uncool, man. Uncool. So why exactly are you pushing that car down the road? What's your excuse? Your load is late? Is your load of pickles really so important that you're willing to put people at risk? Is there some kind of pregnancy convention going on that'll cause mass water breakage if you don't show up on time? Sorry, driver. I'm going to need more convincing. What's that? The guy flipped you the bird earlier? Well, clearly you can quell his road rage by tailgating him and raising his stress level. Brilliant, Sherlock. Just brilliant. Just try to remember this when you're tailgating so close. If he taps his brakes and you hit him because you can't see his taillights, you may just be in jail soon. And if that happens, I, for one, hope that it's your turn to get tailgated.
Hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback?
Dang, driver, that's one mess of feedback. I better get right on that before it spoils. First up, we have CJ, who contacted me through my jobshadow.com interview. There's a link to that interview in the show notes. He says, I really liked reading this and all your other posts. Can I have a piece of advice? My wife and I don't have kids yet, aged 32 and 27, and want to do over the road for a few years so we can get out of debt and buy a house cash, kind of like you and the Evil Overlord. Yeah, CJ. More on that in a bit. He goes on to say, we read about how a few major trucking companies are actively recruiting married couples to be over-the-road teams. My wife was convicted of a felony, drug possession, in Mississippi, but other than that was never arrested or ever got a single moving violation in her life. We both have great driving records and are willing to be on the road for 2 to 3 years straight if a company is willing to send us out. We don't even have a home location preference. We are also willing to get our permits, our CDLs, our DOT medicals, and all that ahead of time too, on our own dime. Will all that increase our chances of getting hired, or should we wait until our felony is expunged in anywhere from 1 to 5 years? By that time, we might have kids and it'll be too late, and we really want to have property and financial freedom before starting a family. Are there any carriers that will consider us? Well, CJ, you've just hit on what I consider to be one of the best uses of truck driving, especially as a team operation, especially with no kids. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's address your questions. First, there aren't a few trucking companies targeting team truckers. There are many of them targeting teams. They don't care who comprises the team either, married or not. Team trucks are super efficient for a company, and that makes team drivers a highly coveted commodity. Second, your wife's felony. Now, this won't keep you guys out of the industry, but it will put a damper on the amount of companies willing to hire you. For instance, if her felony drug charge is within the past 7 years, she can't qualify to get a hazardous materials endorsement. Now, not every company hauls hazmat, but that's one segment of the carriers that are taken off the table for you guys. Another is Canada. Felons aren't allowed in Canada without obtaining a special permit from the Canadian government, and that permit is a major pain to get. Still, not every company will require you to go into Canada. Here's the skinny of it. There's likely some company that will hire her, but finding those companies will take a lot of phone calls and research. Some will take it on a case-by-case basis. And as you undoubtedly already know, the more time that passes between her conviction and the present makes a big difference too. That's understandable. Since a carrier is held responsible for the drivers they hire, they have every right to be leery of someone with a drug history, especially if it's recent. Lastly, although getting your CDLs on your own dime does show initiative and how serious you are, I really don't think it'll help you get hired. At least not much anyway. Companies have certain hiring guidelines they have to keep. If a recruiter has wiggle room when considering a felon, then he's got wiggle room. If there's a hard and fast rule against hiring felons, then his or her hands are tied and there's nothing you can do to impress them enough to bypass that rule. So to sum up, I think you're extremely smart for considering trucking for a few years in order to set yourself up financially. But a word of advice, if you do so, make a financial plan and stay committed to it. It's all too easy to lose focus when your pay dramatically increases. I speak from experience here. Why do you think I'm still out on the road after 16 years? Now, we've got a handle on it now, but the recovery is slow going since we aren't making that team pay anymore. Don't let this be you. Make a plan for your money and focus, man, focus. Now, in order to even get to that point, you're going to have to really want it. You'll have to contact many different carriers and decide whether you like the remaining options before you pursue your driving careers. You'll have to face rejection and manage to keep your chin up. Just remember, it's nothing personal. The recruiters are just following the rules when they tell you no. And perhaps most importantly, you'll have to remind yourself not to get frustrated and blame your wife for this. We've all made stupid mistakes in the past. And before you ask, I never recommend particular trucking companies to people. It's a personal policy I keep because I feel that different carriers are good or bad for different people, and I don't know anyone well enough to make that decision for them. Well, CJ, good luck with whatever you decide, and let me know if I can help with anything else. And CJ wrote me back and said, thanks for your detailed response. With this advice in mind, we'll definitely get CDLs on our own for that slight edge of showing we're serious. Anyone who meets her knows she's a good person who made a mistake, so if we get recruiters to meet us in person, we know we will eventually get a yes. I read your rule about company recommendations before, which is why I didn't ask. For anyone else curious about this issue, there are forums online where people list dozens and dozens of carriers who hire convicted felons, and some of their specific policies. Sometimes case by case, sometimes a specific amount of years it must have gone by. To organize our search, we copied those company names into Excel and can take the next step of researching all their phone numbers so we can keep track of who we've spoken to and all of our options. We hear that carriers are much stricter than in the old days. It's a shame about hazmat, we knew that already. In Canada, we did not know that at all. And we will have no problem focusing on a financial goal. My penny-pinching wife is the psychotic miser to your evil overlord. You're a really good writer, helping a lot of people. Keep up the good work. Thanks again. Well, thanks for the comment there, CJ. I wrote him back and asked him to supply links to those online forums that provide trucking company names of people who will hire felons, and he did so. Both of those links are kind of long and confusing, so probably the best thing you can do is just look for them in the show notes there, or go directly to the blog site itself. There's a link to my jobshadow.com interview also in the show notes. Next up, Gregory writes in on the one called E-logs, do they really increase driving time? I get a lot of comments on these E-log ones, and somehow I think I missed Gregory's. It's kind of old, so if I've done it before, I apologize. I don't think I have, though, and it's a good question, so I wanted to go ahead and make sure I got it in here. He writes, here's my question. I was talking with a driver that uses E-logs, and he says he only drives about 8.5 hours a day. He says he never resets and makes all deliveries on time. He runs across country. What are the ups and downs on this? Oh, he's an owner-operator. Well, Gregory, I sure am glad you tacked on that last sentence, because I was a confused puppy up until then. Here's the thing. In theory, I see nothing wrong with driving 8.5 hours a day and never resetting. But in practice, I'd never do it, nor could I. Here's why. And by the way, this really isn't as much an E-log issue as it is a general time management question. I'm sure you already know that, though. The first reason, we company drivers rarely have control over when our loads pick up and deliver. I'm at the mercy of my company. If they see I have hours available, they toss me a load. And with most companies working under the forced dispatch rules, it's doubtful you can come up with an excuse every day as to why you can't keep running. The chances that I have of getting loads every day that would allow me the flexibility to only drive 8.5 hours per day are somewhere between slim and supermodel anorexic skinny. If my load is going to take more than 11 hours of driving, I'm usually going to have to drive 11, take my 10-hour break, and immediately take off again in order to deliver on time. But let's say that my load will only take 8.5 hours to deliver. Can I just deliver my load and tell them I'm shutting down till morning? Well, there may be a few companies out there that'll let you do that, but I don't know of any. I've certainly never worked for one. Like I said, if you're a company driver and you drive 8.5 hours, that means you've still got 2.5 hours of juice in your bones. At least that's what your dispatcher sees. If you've got hours, you're running. But the guy you spoke to is an owner-operator. If he only feels like working 8.5 hours, that's his choice. He can probably pick and choose loads that work with his 8.5 hour workday. Reason number 2. I don't want to work every day. I'm not lazy, I just prefer to hammer down until I reach my 70 hours and then sit for 34 so I can get my 70 hours back. An example from my pre-trucking days comes to mind. When I worked at a factory, management asked us if we'd rather work 5 8-hour days or 4 9-hour days and only work 4 hours on Friday. It was nearly unanimous to do the latter. Wouldn't you want to get your work over ASAP so you can get on with your pleasure time? If you hammer down for 70 hours, you can then use your 34-hour restart to do things you enjoy. For some, that may be exploring the town, exercising, or even sitting around on your lazy butt and swapping stories in the trucker's lounge. Get up and only drive 8.5 hours per day? That leaves 15.5 hours of downtime every day. Let's see, you might sleep for 8. That leaves 7.5 for goofing off every night. Hey, wait. Maybe this guy does have a point. I mean, it would absolutely drive me bonkers to work like this, but I can see some merit to it. It would be sort of like a regular job back at home. Work 8 or 9 hours, then go home and goof off. Oh, wait. Nope. I'm back to my original thought. What's the point if you're just going to have to hang out with yourself all the time? To each his own, I guess. So, Gregory, I'm sure I've cleared things right up for you, right? Seriously, this is really only an issue that an owner-operator and a very few company drivers will ever have to ponder. The rest of us company drivers out here hammer down when our carrier says to, and we sit without a load the rest of the time. There usually isn't a choice in the matter. Thanks for stopping by and leaving such a great question, Gregory. And now I need to call on all you truckers out there. I know there's a lot of you that I talk to on Twitter who do this 8.5 hours and just work every single day thing. How does that work for you? Why do you like to do that? Like I said, I like to hammer down and get it over with. Write in and tell me which you prefer and why. And lastly, I want to mention a comment that was left on the Spitting Christian Zealot podcast, or actually the blog post. A woman left a comment over there, and due to its sensitive nature, I asked her if I could read it on the podcast. She never wrote me back, and that's just as well, since reading it would have probably made me have to use the explicit tag on this episode. but she did leave a comment on the blog, so I'm going to direct you over there. I'd especially like to encourage any man who thinks that his wife doesn't mind him looking at porn. Suffice it to say, she may not be as okay with it as you think she is. At least this woman sure isn't. She pours her heart out on a public forum, so I think that qualifies as being pretty upset. Head over to abouttruckdriving.com and type TD096 into the search bar. Look for the comment from Dance in the Rain. You may notice it has my picture by her name. I did not write this. This happens on all comments that I had to manually bring over from the old site. If I could figure out how to get rid of my picture, I would, but I'm not that bright. So anywho, get on over there and check it out if you're interested. And lastly, hey, haven't I already said that about 3 times? Anyway, okay. Tomorrow is July the 1st. That means the new rules are kicking in. That means all of you can start writing in and telling me what your experiences are with these 3 new rules, how they're affecting you, or how they're not affecting you. And as always, here's how to contact me. So what do you think about tailgating? Are all these legitimate reasons to be tailgating? Or do you think there's never a good excuse to tailgate? The blog post is awaiting your comment over at abouttruckdriving.com. Just type TD095 into the search bar and have at it. As always, you can also email me at truckerdump@gmail.com, and I can be found tweeting away under the ever so clever name of Todd McCann. That's 2 D's, 2 C's, and 2 N's. Well, I finally got my iTunes ratings to show, thanks to my friend Alan, and someone named White Lines Blue Skies left a nice review too, so thanks for that. And thanks to all of you who listen to every episode. I'm much obliged. So until next time, drive safe and stay out of my way.